audible to everybody?
Yes.
Thanks. आणि मी माझं पॉवर पॉईंट दिलेलं होतं. ओके, ते इथे लोड होईल. आणि बिफोर आय बिगिन, एक फक्त छोटासा गोंधळ कायम होतो तो सुधारते. मी SNT युनिव्हर्सिटीशी संलग्न असलेल्या BM रुईया गर्ल्स कॉलेजमध्ये शिकवते. दादरच्या रुईया कॉलेजमध्ये शिकवत नाही. हे आय एम यूज टू इट नाव. दॅट्स ओके. सो मंचावरच्या दोघांची परवानगी घेऊन मी सुरुवात करू. मला थोडंसं काय म्हणतो आपण आनंदही होतोय आणि थोडंसं काय म्हणतात ना, एक छान भीती वाटते तसं होत आहे. कारण कुमार केतकर सर डायसवर आहे. आत्ताच मी त्यांना सांगितलं की त्यांनी मला 92-93च्या बॅचमध्ये गरवारे इन्स्टिट्यूट ऑफ कम्युनिकेशन्समध्ये शिकवलेलं. त्याच्यामुळे जर्नलिझम शिकवलं नव्हतं. त्याच्यामुळे आपल्याला अतिशय आदरणीय असलेल्या आवडलेल्या शिक्षकांच्या बरोबर डायसवरती उभं राहून बोलायला मिळणं इज काइंड ऑफ इंटरेस्टिंग, आय हॅव टू से. I'll be speaking in English, and so yeah, my PPT is loaded. The topic is quick summary of the book by Dr. Ambedkar, The Problem of Indian Rupee. So, respected members on the dais, members of the organizing committee from Samashti Foundation, Ambedkar Lab Initiative, Madhukar Rao Tamagade Trust, and all the dear friends in the audience, warm greetings and a hello from Swati. I'm glad to be part of this important event. As a woman in India, and as a teacher of economics, and as a person who has only admiration for and respect for the genius mind of Dr. Ambedkar. He always said, educate, agitate, and organize. Educate, agitate, and organize. A slogan of only 3 words. A slogan of only 3 words, but it can speak volumes of Dr. Ambedkar's perspective of bringing social, political, and economic justice to the underprivileged people of India. Such a slogan coming from him, I think, I believe, is rooted in his deep understanding of how existing structures in the economy affect the underprivileged people. This slogan kind of sums up how the underprivileged can make themselves capable to negotiate a larger share of the cake in the economy. Education, organizing, and negotiating are indeed key aspects to improve economic well-being of the people. Keeping a note of this slogan in mind, which perhaps is a backbone of Dr. Ambedkar's thought, let's now get down to this book, which he wrote 100 years ago. So, yeah. Dr. Ambedkar is renowned and well-respected alumni of London School of Economics. His doctoral thesis, The Indian Rupee, was later published as The Problem of Indian Rupee, Its Origin and Its Solution in 1993 in London. We are here today to be part of the centenary celebration of the publication of this thesis by Dr. Ambedkar, for which he was awarded his first doctoral degree in economics. We usually know about Dr. Ambedkar as his contributions in the field of Indian justice, legal system, and in framing the Constitution of India. The backbone of our existence, his contribution is. As a country, after we have obtained our freedom, but his contribution to the economic policy making and institutional development way back in 1990s. As a person who did BA Economics and MA Economics, we never studied about Dr. Ambedkar's economic thought. But it was very interesting during the COVID times. We kind of decided that our college, we will have some, small program about Dr. Ambedkar's economic thought. And we decided that teachers will not do a lot of talking in that time, in that program. The students will. But obviously we have to train a lot of students. So I ended up reading Dr. Ambedkar's economic writings around that time. I had read his essays, political essays and books way back as a college student in Marathi, but I never had a chance to read his economic writings until COVID times. Okay? And accidentally we decided in the department that we will do this kind of contributions by Indian economic thinkers. And the first name was Dr. Ambedkar. So that's how it became, my journey with Dr. Ambedkar's writing about economic theory. And anyway, Dr. Ambedkar's contributions in economic policy making, in making the institutions of development, his contribution has gone largely unnoticed. And we need to focus our attention towards finding out, researching the way he had shaped up our institutional building and our thinking towards a more inclusive kind of a economic development process. So let's take a quick look at the summary of this book. And what I'm going to do is we are going to have some salient features of the book. That earlier slide was just a scheme of my presentation. Introduction is already over. Now there will be 5 or 6 salient features of this book. Then there is a small thing about significance of the book and then remarks. But probably I'm going to cut short a lot of things. Please keep an eye on the time and let me know if I'm supposed to wind up in another 10 minutes. Please let me know. Okay? Thanks. So, some salient features of the book. Currency question. Next slide. Yeah. The book raises the currency question in British India, which had to deal with legacy issues. Legacy issues consisted mainly of a disintegrated currency system being practiced in different provinces across India. Dr. Ambedkar discussed characteristics of trade and business in India even from the time when it was divided into several monarchical regions. He described how standards and currency were during the time of the Mughal Empire and mentioned that the economic condition of the country was far better then than that of today. That is, the condition was far better than 1920s, 100 years ago. Dr. Ambedkar says that the condition of Indian economy was far better in Mughal times. Yeah? So during the Mughal Empire, Indian currency, he gives a reason why he thought that India's economy was much better, because during the Mughal Empire, Indian currency had a worldwide boundary of trade and free use of gold mohar and silver rupee. So this book has explained standardized minting of gold and silver coins across the regional mints of the Mughal era before Mughal Sultanate was dismantled into fractions. If you can recall, Dr. Ganesh Devi discussed about एका मिंट मध्ये 172 grams आहेत, एका मिंट मध्ये 173 grams आहेत. So he discusses about that, and this system of having some standard did change the gold pegging standards across the regions, because when the Mughal Empire was dismantled, it was divided across, few sultanates. So this one part of the currency this book discusses. Now this book has been a catalyst to the creation of Reserve Bank of India. Yeah. Now we go to the next slide, that is historical analysis. Second, whenever you have to turn the slide, I'll let you know. Thanks. Historical analysis. This book provided a historical analysis of the Indian currency system and banking as it existed during pre-British India. It brings out the use of gold and silver standard by the Mughals, describes standardized weights and designs across different provincial mints before segregation of Mughal Sultanate. Book traces the evolution and identifies the problems associated with India's currency system. It does that during early chapters. Now the third salient feature is there are few economic insights which are given by this book about India of that time and the kind of things can be made. The book is considered to be one of the best works on economics by Dr. Ambedkar, whom Nobel laureate Dr. Professor Amartya Sen has called that Ambedkar is his father in economics. So Dr. Ambedkar, who is celebrated as a champion of the underprivileged, has argued in his book against the gold pegging system, as that system was, though in the interest of the British colonial rulers, it was not in the best interest of India. No wonder then he's often referred to as the father of economics of India. See, only somebody who is choosing to understand about underprivileged and make changes so that underprivileged lives can be made better can only think of the influence the old gold currency system, gold exchange currency system had, the adverse impact it had on an underprivileged nation called India, and how the colonial powers were able to access a lot of privilege and profit out of it. So this kind of a conscious is all over, we can see in his writing, also in his book, and the way he has beautifully challenged people like John Maynard Keynes, who were known, he's a known economist with very strong language, a very strong, actually as a teenager, as a college student, I was a big fan of Keynes for his language. The way he challenged his Marshall, his own professor, and the way he wrote rhetorical lines. And when I came to know, say 2 years ago, while reading this book, that Dr. Ambedkar challenged Keynes, and he kind of, used all his takes. He kept everything on hold because he wrote about it in his PhD thesis, which had to be approved by LSE. And that's like sheer commitment, sheer belief in his own logic, arguments. And of course, his PhD thesis was not immediately accepted because it had, they said, too many revolutionary comments. Too many revolutionary criticism leveled against the British Raj. And that was something, probably he had to sober it out, and then he had to submit, and then he was accepted. Okay? So that's how the scene is. When he says to people, educate, organize and agitate, he's never been leaving behind. Even in his PhD thesis, that line keeps shining through. That's how I felt while reading it. You are going to feel that this is an economics teacher and talking so emotionally, but it's okay. We are here as a human being. Yeah. And it's all right to have a fangirl movement, even about Dr. Ambedkar, after 100 years of publication. Thanks. So the fourth part is influence on policy. So this is a thesis, PhD thesis submitted to the LSE. So obviously this book has presented historical evidence, discussion and arguments. They have provided a lot of insights to the development of India's currency system and other aspects of economic policy making. Even if this thesis is discussing intricacies of the currency system of India, Dr. Ambedkar's concern, his commitment towards the underprivileged is perhaps what makes him evaluate the full gold plating system and argue against it. So now we'll go to the next slide, continued relevance. 100 years of a book. You know, आपल्या मराठीमध्ये खूप वाईट वाक्प्रचार आहे, शंभरी भरली, राईट? या पुस्तकाला 100 वर्ष पूर्ण झाली आहेत, पण तरीही ते आजही आपण त्यातून काही शिकण्यासारखं आहे. या पुस्तकाची काही 100 वगैरे भरलेली नाही आहे. जा, जे असं म्हणतील त्यांना थँक्यू, गुड बाय. So continued relevance. Despite being first published in 1923, the book's content remains relevant today, with no significant alterations required in its text. Comprehensive coverage. The book is part of a 2-volume series on the history of Indian currency and banking, the problem of the rupee forming the volume 1. The second volume was published later, 1927 or 28, I forgot the year. And that volume is called The History of Indian Currency and Banking. Okay? So let's understand the significance of the book. Significance of the book. No, earlier. Okay, significance of the book. Word cloud. Dr. Ambedkar's thesis, The Problem of the Rupee, was a comprehensive study of Indian currency system and the impact of British colonial rule on the Indian economy. The Kindle book version of this book I have used contains 310 pages. Kindle version has a slightly smaller page size, so 300 pages, but otherwise it's about 250 pages, I guess. Dr. Ambedkar tried to explain the troubles that were associated with the national currency of India, the rupee. He argued against the British policymakers of that time, as well as the conventional economic wisdom, which suggested that the exchange rate of Indian rupee be kept too high in order to facilitate the trade of factory products from England. The arguments he has put forward in his book challenge the opinion of John Maynard Keynes, among others, regarding pegging Indian rupee with gold standard alone. His mentor or supervisor at the LSE, Professor Edward Kennan, wrote in his foreword to this book that in 1893, Edward Kennan was one of the few economists who believed that the rupee could be kept at a fixed ratio with gold by the method then proposed. He believed in the system, and he believed in the system which existed till Dr. Ambedkar was submitting his thesis. And although he believed in that system, although some years elapsed without any desired effect of that system on India's economy. So here I want to quote again Professor Edward Kennan that I do not share Mr. Ambedkar's hostility to the system, nor accept most of his arguments against it and its advocates. But he, that is Dr. Ambedkar, hits some nails very squarely on the head. And even when I have thought him quite wrong, I have found a stimulating freshness in his views and reasons. I deliberately added this because this was the ways in which professors, teachers, mentors of PhD and the assessors were able to view the student, and they were able to judge the student from the originality of the contribution and the arguments the person is making, and not just on the basis of which camp the student belongs to. That's it, yeah. So there are, now I come to the last part of my thing, remarks, but it's kind of to sum up this book and discuss, which discusses issues of the problems of Indian currency across 7 chapters. Okay, first chapter is titled as From a Double Standard to Silver Standard. Second chapter discusses the history of Indian currency and banking. It devotes its pages to elaborate on the silver standard and the dislocation of its parity. This entire book gives you a nice sequential understanding of the way that currency system has evolved in India and how the changes happen, how they influence our economy, and how Dr. Ambedkar have woven through to make sense out of it. So, chapter 3 covers silver standard and the evils of its instability. Very elaborate, text is there. Obviously, it's a PhD thesis, so it's not a joke at all. Chapter 4 establishes the importance of gold standard as it provided a common standard value. It explains that the history of the agitation for the reform of the Indian currency is a history of the clash between 2 systems of currency, one being the gold standard and the other being the silver standard. During British era, attempts were made to make the currency system favorable to gold. Now, chapter 5. In chapter 5, Dr. Ambedkar argues about from a gold standard to a gold exchange standard as a system he suggests for management of currency in India. But then in chapter 6 of his book, he explains the stability of the exchange standard. He states, trade no doubt is dependent on good money, but the growth of trade is not a conclusive proof that the money is good. In this chapter, Dr. Ambedkar explains how the fluctuations in the price of silver and gold and changes in the relative price of gold and silver would adversely affect the currency and trade, thereby economy. Chapter 7, that's the final chapter. Chapter 7 is titled as a return of the gold standard. Okay, so in this chapter, as per the chapter, we think he is going to come back and accept the gold standard. But this chapter is where you have his direct statements about John Maynard Keynes and against the conventional wisdom. And that chapter is great to read. It's rather more tough to read, but at the same time, the moment you understand the things, it's magical, it's fun, it's great. So we are presented with the synthesis of the 2 systems in this chapter, namely the gold standard and the gold exchange standard. In the exchange standard, as it operated then, the coin was manipulated to keep it at par with gold. as if money is important only for the amount of gold it will procure. But money is not used only for how much gold that money is worth. But how many things? Why do we use money? For how many things that money can buy or it is worthy of buying. Another part is stability of a currency. Dr. Ambedkar argues that stability of currency in terms of gold is of importance only to the dealers in gold, but its stability in terms of commodities, in general affects all people. And it affects even bullion dealers because even they have to go and buy all other things to live. So, the real merit of a currency system lies in maintaining the standard of value stable in terms of commodities in general. I guess this statement is timeless, isn't it? The real merit of a currency system lies in maintaining the standard of value stable in terms of commodities in general. So in this chapter, Dr. Ambedkar has put forward strong arguments contrary to the point of view of legendary John Maynard Keynes, and says even the Professor Keynes of 1920 will prefer a gold standard to a gold exchange standard, for under the former prices have varied in much less than has been the case under the latter. So after all this, I hope I have given some justice in presenting this summary of this classic book in the field of Indian economics. Given the paucity of time, I'm going to end my summarizing here. So dear friends, we are celebrating the centenary of the publication of this thesis. It is important to spend adequate time to understand the contents of this book. Hopefully, students and teachers of economics of today would be tempted to read this book. If that happens, even few students and teachers and my respectable colleagues, or even any other person who is not professionally trained in economics, who would read this book, then my intention towards presenting this summary would be fulfilled. Thanks a lot for patiently listening to this. I want to express my gratitude to the organizers of the event, the Samashti Foundation, the Ambedkar Lab Initiative, and Madhukar Rao Tamagade Trust, as well as Yashwantrao Zaman Pratishthan for organizing this event meticulously and successfully. Thank you all, and Jai Bhim.